Hi, Marina. I think people are coming in.
That's great.
Yeah.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, everyone. And Carol is coming on. Thank you so much for joining us today from wherever you are. While we're waiting for people to join in, could you please put in the chat where you're joining us from today? That would be great to know. Thank you so much. Hi, Carol. We can't hear you. Oh, okay.
Hi, Boyong. Hi, Marina.
Okay, good to see you. We already have 14 attendees, and I've just asked everyone to put in the chat where they're joining us from. I'm Boyong Lim. I'm joining from Bangkok, Thailand. Carol, where are you joining us from today?
Hi, everyone. I'm joining from Manila, Philippines. Hello.
And I am Marina Walker Guevara, and I am joining from Maryland in the US.
Awesome. Please feel free to put in the chat where you're joining us from today. We're still waiting for people to trickle in. Let us know where you're joining us from. And while we do that, I'm going to see if I can share my screen. So give me 1 second. Just for people to know, while we're waiting for people and sharing the screen, we've planned this session to be 45 minutes long, but we want to make sure that we cover as many questions as possible. So in case we have a lot of questions from the audience, we would be happy to stay on for another 15 minutes to answer any questions you may have about the fellowship. So, oh, I see the chat is disabled. I am so sorry, everyone. I will
No problem.
Edit the functions.
In the worst case scenario, we can just use the Q&A channel for anything. Don't worry, Boyang. As you all can see, this is a low-key meeting where we hope that we can just clarify questions. You can feel confident to ask whatever you want to know about the fellowship if you're thinking about applying, if you have questions about how to shape your application, if you have questions about the timing, the financial aspect of the support we provide, and more. And we're so happy to be joined by Carol Ilagan today. Carol is a fellow of from 2023, 2024, or sorry, yes, 2023, 2024. So she's just finishing her fellowship. She also just published her project, which has been fantastic. And I'm sure she will tell us a little bit about that project. But what is wonderful about Carol is that she had never done algorithmic accountability reporting before her fellowship. And to see her growth and just the great project that she came up with has been very inspiring. So while she didn't have that experience on algorithmic accountability, what Carol did have was, just a great track record as a reporter. So we knew that there's not that many new skills that you need to have in order to do this kind of work, just like some of the old-fashioned traits of being a good reporter, and a few more things. How are we doing, Boyang, with the chat? Should we get started?
I think we'll have to use the Q&A box. So sorry, everyone. I should have checked this, but I think the chat is disabled and I'll have to restart the webinar if I want to change that. So please feel free to put your questions or comments in the Q&A box. We'll just use that for today's session. And Marina, I would be grateful if you can keep an eye on the Q&A box, and you can feel free to interrupt me whenever we have questions. Thank you. Okay, I'll share my screen. 1 second. So can everyone see my screen? Can you see my screen? Oh, Marina, I can't hear you.
Yeah, it is loading. It says loading. So
okay.
But now it looks like it's okay. Now we can see it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I've been having some internet issues, so apologies about that. Okay, so my name is Bo Young Lim. Thank you for joining the session today from wherever you are. We want to, again, like as I said, we want to cover as many questions as possible. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box anytime at your convenience throughout the sessions. This webinar will be recorded and posted on our website for those who could not make it to today's event. So if you want to revisit this session after the session is concluded, you can visit our Pulitzer Center website. And last but not least, we will, before we jump into the things, I just wanted to remind everyone that our call for proposals for the fellowship is now open, and we are accepting applications until August 10th, 2024. So what we're going to do today, we'll try to demystify the application process for some of you who are thinking of applying for our AI fellowships. And then one of our AI fellows from our 2023-2024 cohort that Marina just introduced, Carol Ilagan, is joining us today to share some tips on how she found her story, how they prepared for their fellowship application, and she might be able to answer any questions if you have any specific questions on the fellowship experience. And towards the end of our session, we'll leave some time for questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Okay, so some of you have already seen this on our website. This is our goals for the fellowship. This is basically the gist of what we're looking for. And what's different this year for the AI fellowship applications is that while we are welcoming a broad range of projects, issues related to the impact of AI in society, this year we're also placing special emphasis on at least one project on transparency and governance in relation to AI. So you might want to check out the frequently asked questions. I just put 2 here, but I'll share the link later. Anyone, a journalist, staff, or freelancer from anywhere around the world can join. We want to see team players who have a collaborative mindset, reporters who are curious and deeply interested in how AI impacts the world and has the urge to explain it well to the communities they serve. And we also have this outreach section, which I could cover in the Q&A session. But basically, once your story is published, we don't end there. We have education and outreach programs at the Pulitzer Center, and we want you to be interested and willing to participate in our outreach activities. These include both online and offline visits to schools and campuses, and talking about your project to students, but it also includes public-facing virtual and offline events. The fellowship is remote, and it will be run in English language, but you can publish in your own language and in English. These are some of the benefits that we think you might like to get from the AI Accountability Fellowship. Every month, we require the selected fellows to come together in a virtual Zoom room, and we will have discussions. We will have special speakers coming and talking to you about their own research or their own previous project about AI accountability. The financial support, $20,000 up to $20,000 per project, covers records requests, travel expenses, data analysis, and stipend. This is a great opportunity. It also comes with having a group of peers. I think Carol can talk a little bit about that later. We also have mentorship opportunities depending on what your project is. And we've loved seeing how our AI fellows enjoy the company of the group of peers and start find ways to collaborate. So I think these are the few perks that we can share. You can find more of the frequently asked questions in this link. It's on our website, pretty easy to find. And please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box again. Sorry, the chat is not open today. So first of all, I wanted to tell you that it's okay if you are new to this. Carol was new to this when she first started her fellowship, and most of us are. This is a very new field of reporting. So don't be afraid if you don't have any experience in covering artificial intelligence. Very few people have covered this topic in depth, and you might not feel sure whether or not to apply it just because you haven't had the experience or opportunity to cover AI. But this is the reason why our fellowship exists. We want to help journalists feel more confident about covering AI, and we want to give you the best support possible. So this was our second cohort, 2023 to 2024 AI Accountability Fellowship cohort. We had 8 wonderful journalists based in 5 different continents. And I just wanted to show some examples. These are the screenshots I sneakily took in our AI fellowship meetings. You can see that one fellow, Neve McIntyre from the UK, she was talking about Toloka AI, a company that she was investigating. This is another sneak peek into another fellow's presentation in one of our virtual sessions, Tatiana Diaz, whose story I'll talk a little bit about later in the session. She was talking about the story and like the AI supply chain story that she was working on. Some photos, just because I've talked a lot and I just wanted to take your mind off of serious stuff, but these are 3 of our fellows. From the left, Jennifer Strong, Naipanoi Lapapa, and Emily Alina Dugdale. They came together in, I think it was a convening or an outreach event, Marina, on the west coast of the US, and on the far right is our Pulitzer Center staff. So we also have these opportunities of fellows coming together in person. This year, we were very lucky. We brought together our AI fellows in Amsterdam in June for the Mozilla Festival. And we had 3 panels where our fellows were talking and sharing about their projects beyond the journalism industry, and talking to people coming from tech industry, artists, advocacy, like civil society group members. It was a very interesting experience for, at least for me, and I think the others enjoyed this very well. So I will give you some examples of the stories that our AI fellows have published so far. Just before I jump into this, again, our fellowship aims to support and foster new reporting. And so we do not expect you to be experts or have done blockbuster investigations on artificial intelligence. It would be good to have, but we're not looking for seasoned journalists who are very experienced in this field. For instance, less than a quarter of the AI fellows in our second cohort had covered AI before they started the fellowship. But each of them were selected because they had a strong track record as a good journalist in their own field of reporting, had a good story idea, showed strength in data journalism or human-centric approaches, had done in-depth reporting projects, and were willing to learn and grow with a group of peers. And many of them have told us they benefited from discussing their projects with their fellow fellows, as well as having conversations with experts from the field. These interactions have inspired some of them to try new approaches they had not tried before or even thought of. So you can see here, just published last week is Carol's project on Grab. She can talk about it a little bit later, but you can see the wide range of stories. We have Carol's story, but we have stories coming from Brazil on content moderation, like the intersection between AI and labor. We had stories on how platforms such as WhatsApp is used for election narratives by political parties in India. And we do not discriminate against different formats or methods. As you can see, we had a podcast, we had data-driven reporting, and shoe-leather reporting all mixed together. These are some other stories from our AI fellows as well. So I'll just quickly pass on these, just to show you that, like, there's a wide range of stories that you can explore, and a wide range of formats and methods are welcome. So you can visit this link, and I'll share the slides later after the session is over with everyone who joined here, so you can click on the links. But basically, we have this page where our fellows and grantees share their methodologies. So how we investigated welfare algorithms in India, mass surveillance in Argentina. You can see all sorts of methodology pieces, and these might be a good starting point if you have no idea where you're going to get started and you don't know how to explain or how to approach your reporting. Just exploring some of these methodology pieces might be a good idea to get some hints. So I'm almost done with my part, and I think we can hand things over to Carol. But before that, I just wanted to share a few lessons that we've learned from our 2 previous years of the fellowship. So one of the misleading impressions that people seem to have of reporting on AI with an accountability lens is that it's very technical and for only the special people in the tech beat, but this is not true. Centering human voices, focusing on how the technology impacts real human lives in the story, we've found that is essential in both making the story stronger and appealing to the audience. And it makes it more sociable and humanizes the story. And this was something that kept resurfacing in our conversations among our AI fellows. And many of them have decided to apply that learning in their reporting, which made their reporting stronger. Be prepared to work with folks from different disciplines, as this is a field that requires interdisciplinary collaborations. And we also found that we need more people doing explanatory reporting, which is to help the communities that you are serving make sense of what this artificial intelligence technology is, who is affected in what ways and why, and how can we make it better for these communities. Throughout the fellowship, you'll see that we encourage you to be willing to expose yourself to a wide range of approaches that you have not used previously and experiment with them. For example, one of our AI fellows from the first cohort, Varsha Bansal, was inspired by her fellow Lam Tuivo to do a survey on Uber drivers in India, something she had never done before. But there were no publicly available data because Uber is a private company. So she collected her own data set that Uber could not refute, which eventually made her story stronger. And her story in turn inspired India's gig worker union to collect their own data on how many people had been locked out of their accounts due to facial recognition errors on gig work platforms, and to petition the platforms themselves. If the project that you are thinking of pursuing involves records requests, freedom of information requests, or rights to information requests, you need to file it as soon as possible, because this is one of the things that takes the longest amount of time based on our experience. We want you to always have a plan B in case your initial hypothesis does not hold up, or if your newsroom, things can go wrong in the story. So like in case, like you always have to think of, what if this happens, if my story doesn't hold up, or if my outlet decides to drop the story, like what should I do? Like we encourage you to have a plan B and think about it now. And last but not least, we want you to start your conversation with your editors at the news outlets very early on. Some of our freelance fellows told us that editors at news outlets sometimes can't decide where to place the story when the story intersects between AI and policing and surveillance, or AI with education. Does it go to the tech desk or a society desk? And there's still a lot of confusion around how to place AI stories. So if you are a staff member at a newsroom, if you're a freelancer at a newsroom, we still want to make sure that the newsroom or the editor you're working with will support you and let you spend time working on your fellowship project and participate in the required meetings and trainings. Okay, so enough from me. I think this is the highlight of our session. we want to invite Carol to talk about a little bit about her experience as a fellow and her story. So, Carol, I have like 3 questions for you, and I think Marina, please feel free to disturb us if there's any other questions coming for Carol. So please keep the questions coming in the Q&A box. Carol, so what was your project about for those who haven't read it or listened to it yet? Just a gist of what you were looking for in your story, and how did you find your story?
Thank you, Boyong. Hi, everyone. Good day to you all. So yeah, I'm Carol, and I am based in Manila, Philippines. So for my AI accountability project, I focused on platform work here in the Philippines. So of course, as we know, work used to be limited by geography, but the internet changed much of that. So I thought of looking at uh, different types of platform work that essentially uses algorithm or AI systems. And then I realized that, because initially I was really having a hard time on figuring out what stories to work on, because when you talk about AI, it sounds so um can be overwhelming because I wasn't familiar with the topic. But then when I was reading the stories that came out of the fellowship, I realized these are stories that are about automated systems, so anything automated. So that's how I came to look at platform work. So in my project, I'm looking at ride-hailing apps, the risks of unregulated algorithm. That's another that's another word that how do you even start to investigate algorithms, and also the role of Filipinos in the AI supply chain. So as you can see, it's like you're reporting on or trying to examine uh, the AI system, but also trying to look at the big picture. So as I've mentioned earlier, the AI supply chain. So it's not necessarily investigating the application itself, like for example, Grab or a ride-hailing app. But again, looking at the big picture and looking at the role of data labelers or data annotators. So yeah, I again, this somehow discovers or touches on the different phases involved in the development of AI systems. So maybe if some of you might have attended Karen House session, the AI Spotlight series, she talks about the phases of AI development. And then I realized, oh, okay, so my story is in this phase, and then the other story is in this phase. So I thought that was really helpful. So yeah, essentially, Boyong, it's platform work.
Thank you so much. So I think this is another question that people might have if they have a story idea. How did you decide if you had enough to put in an application, apply for the fellowship? What was your experience on that, Karen?
Okay, so I think Boyong and Marina mentioned this earlier. At the start, to be honest, I really had a hard time figuring out what story to work on, because again, I think the examples that I was reading earlier was about policing, and it's not something that it's not the same scenario here in the Philippines, for instance. But then when I realized, like on a daily basis, we use a lot of applications that it's automated. Then that's how kind of that became my lead. And then when I read I read a lot of stories about, it doesn't necessarily mention AI, but again, anything about automated systems. And that's how I got inspired. And then I realized um, this particular ride hailing company in the Philippines, which dominates the market right now, uses algorithm to essentially that's how the application runs. It's driven by an algorithm, but we don't know much about it. So when I read about stories and also read about what's happening in other countries, that's how I figured out, maybe there's something here that isn't reported yet in the Philippines. So I know there have been some stories, especially in Indonesia and other Southeast Asian countries. There have been stories about ride-hailing apps, but more looking at not necessarily the system itself. So that's when I realized there's something that is not underreported, but is unreported.
I see. I really like how you shared your thinking process on this. I think, Marina, maybe should we answer one of the questions that are related to what Carol just shared, though? There's a question from Asta about how much pre-reporting should they have? And can you suggest what was done by earlier fellows? So maybe, Carol, how much pre-reporting did you have when you were applying?
For the fellowship, I did do some significant pre-reporting because we have to take into consideration that the fellowship is just 10 months. It sounds like a lot of time, but because of the nature of the stories that you are likely to do, it's common that, information or data might not be easily accessible or available. So you have to plan for that. So I did try to reach out to some people, to give me some leads. And then, as I've mentioned earlier, I read a lot of stories trying to figure out if I do the same stories here in the Philippines, I try to imagine who are the people that I would reach out to, or what kind of data I would need. So I didn't do original reporting yet, but checking the feasibility of the story. So that basically is the pre-reporting part. So checking for the feasibility for the story. So it's quite important.
And I
Awesome.
can
Thank you
add to add that, the amount of pre-reporting is the one that is going to take you from proposing a general topic to proposing a story with a particular angle. And this fellowship is competitive. We get a lot of strong proposals. And so the more you can show that, as Carol said, the feasibility of the story that you're proposing, the novelty, the different angle. If it might be that you are building on work that others have done, in journalism, very few things are 100% original, novel, but show us how you are building. And I think one of the questions is what has been reporting on this before. So tell us what is the body of work that is available and how your story is going to bring a new perspective, is going to bring new data or a new angle to the project, to the field. I remember one of our India fellows reporting on welfare schemes in India and how automated systems were being introduced and creating a lot of discrimination. So they didn't, at the time of the pitch, they hadn't interviewed the victims, for example, of the schemes, but they had identified which were of the million welfare schemes in India, which were like the 4 or 5 that they were going to focus on, in what states, and also had identified some lawyers and NGOs that already were working with victims that had been unfairly removed from the welfare system due to these algorithms. And so that for us was enough to show us that there was some strong pre-reporting, and that the story was really feasible and concrete. And indeed, that was the case, and the project was a great success. I can tackle quickly the story about outlet if you want, Boyan.
Yeah, I was going to go to that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes, so the question about should I have an outlet by the time I apply? We strongly recommend that you do. And this is because for us, it's really important that during your fellowship, whether you are a staff or you are a freelancer, that you have a host outlet that is committed to your project. Because ultimately, of course, we want these stories to run. We want these stories to have a home and to have, most importantly, to have an audience. And an audience that can really learn and benefit from your reporting. So as Boyan said, the sooner you can have those editors and that outlet on board, the better. And we do take that into account when we make decisions about our finalist candidates. It is important for us that that outlet exists, that is committed, and that you have the support you are going to need throughout this process. We have had a few experiences, and thankfully not many, where outlets have had difficulties supporting fellows, and that has made fellows' lives really difficult in their projects. And so if you don't have a full commitment, but at least you can talk in your application about where your conversation with the outlet is. You can share some emails if that is appropriate. You can share some, whatever documentation you have to show where your project stands with a particular outlet and why you chose that outlet, why that audience do you think will be important to bring into this project.
I think on that note, Marina and Carol, I think it would be interesting for the audience if, Carol, you could share a little bit about why you chose Puma Podcast and the outlets that you're working with right now, the Commoner, and just the reasoning and how you approach them. Maybe that would be helpful for some of the freelance applicants who might be thinking about applying for the fellowship.
Yeah, thank you, Boyong. So in my case, before joining the fellowship, I was working full-time with the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, or PCIJ. But when I applied for the fellowship, I strategically thought about being able to reach a wider audience. So I took into consideration the scenario here in the Philippines. So apart from working with PCIJ, my organization before, I did reach out to new startups here in the Philippines. So these Puma Podcast and Commoner are independent media startups in the Philippines, and they do great work on audio reporting. And then Commoner does a lot of social media first content. So for me, that's very important, especially given that the topic is AI accountability reporting. So yeah, essentially that was the reasoning. I'm trying to get a wider reach, because I knew that this topic, the audiences of Puma Podcast and Commoner, these are the topics that perhaps their audiences would want to hear about and learn about. And I think that's pretty much the case, because so far we've been getting a lot of reads and engagement on the stories so far.
Thank you so much, Carol. I think there was another question about multiple outlets, and I have just answered it in the Q&A box. And for those who just joined, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. The chat is not available today. So, and you can also see other people's questions and upvote if you would like to get behind that question. So that would help us prioritize it. There was another question about multiple outlets. And in your case, Carol, you are working with multiple, like 3 outlets, if I understood correctly. I think the question was, can there be more than one outlet supporting? But like, what is the thing that you want to share with the audience about working with different outlets? Like, how do you manage all of the three different
Yeah.
outlets?
So I mean, of course, I mean it's great to be working with multiple outlets because again that helps widen the reach and engagement for your stories. But then again, of course, we also have to take into consideration the administrative part of it. So that meant three different outputs on the same story. So I had a text story, I had an audio story, a podcast, and also material for social media content. But again, I don't think it's a requirement for fellows to be working with multiple outlets. It's just that because my case is I'm a freelance journalist here in the Philippines. So I had, you know, some kind of flexibility. So again, there are, I suppose, you know, there are advantages, of course, and there are, I wouldn't say disadvantages, but maybe just be mindful that that would also take some time, of course, working with different outlets.
Yeah.
Oyan, do you think that we should answer some questions about budget? There were a question about like breakdown of expenses.
Yeah, sure. I think Carol was writing something to answer that question
Okay.
at the Q&A box. But Carol, would you like to share how you structured the budget whenever you were applying?
You are on mute, Carol.
Sorry. So again, the case for me is I'm not working full time with an organization. So I had to think like a news manager. So of course, like you would, you know, when you plan for reporting on a project. So uh, I I incorporated, of course, expenses for documentary research, travel, editing services because I had to hire an editor and an artist as well. In my case, because I worked with three news outlets, I had to take those into consideration also. So I had contracts with three different outlets also for what they would deliver for or how they would, you know, their approach for the story. So um, I had I budgeted for my own expenses for my own reporting as I produced the story. But for example, for Puma podcast, I had to set aside an amount for because you know their editing would be different because it's audio editing. And then for Commoner, for example, they worked with artists, so that's separate. But essentially, it's kind of like you know the typical expenses. What my lesson is though is of course at the start and this might be helpful for for everyone. I didn't realize that we would do our own data collection. So which now I realize is common for, I think that's basic for algorithmic reporting because essentially we don't have, unless I think there was the story from the Lighthouse reports where you know they were given access to the algorithm or the how the system works. But I think in most cases, if you're looking into an algorithm, more or less you wouldn't have data be given to you by you know either the company, of course, or a government agency. So be prepared for setting an amount for you know if in the case you know you collect your own data. So in my case, I had to hire 20 researchers to uh, attempt to book rides on Grab for nearly every hour for 1 week. So that I had to take into consideration with the budget. But I suppose, yeah, maybe, you know, in terms of documentary and data acquisition, if, you know, you think you might need to collect data, you might want to take that into consideration when budgeting.
Yeah, actually, on that note, there's a question from Sharef. Can we outsource or hire some professional technicians in terms of like scraping data, for example.
I love to answer this question.
Sure, that's why we're going to that one.
Okay. So hi Sharef, thank you for that question. So what's great about this fellowship, as Boyong mentioned earlier, is that we're not just given opportunity or financial support to do our stories, but uh, really a network of experts and collaborators. So it could either be your own co-fellows within the cohort, but also Pulitzer Center's own team. So they have a data team. So in my case, for my project, I worked with Federico Acosta Reyes, one of Pulitzer Center's data specialists. So when we realized Grab has a public API, he was the one who helped me scrape the data. So I think if in terms of the question is about hiring professionals, but if you're thinking about, scraping data, anything technical or anything related to data, you'll be in good hands with the Pulitzer Center's data team. So I worked with Federico and also Kang, who is based in Malaysia.
Awesome.
And just to clarify briefly, like the data team tends to but prioritize fellows who don't have maybe that data support in their newsroom. So if you happen to work in a newsroom that has its own data team, then we'll probably ask, can your data team support you on this? And if not, we will provide that support on data and research.
Yeah.
And that is why what Francis says in the question, not a question, Carol's story was very interesting and groundbreaking, that we got good traction in our web and social media, might even localize their methodology. Francis from Daily Guardian in the Philippines. So I just wanted to uplift that comment on your story.
Thank you, Francis. Francis is the EIC of the Daily Guardian in the Philippines. And when we syndicated the story, they published it also. Thank you, Francis.
Awesome. Okay, I think there's a couple more questions, but I'll just run through the rest of the slides and then we can go back to the Q&As, and we'll stay on a little bit longer to answer some of your questions. So please keep the questions coming in the Q&A box, and we'll go back to the questions after the final ones, which these slides, we don't have that many slides, but if you have any further questions after the session is over, just send me an email at blim@pulitzercenter.org. And hopefully you've, before sending the emails, please read the frequently asked questions on our website. But I'll stop sharing my screen to focus more on the Q&A. So maybe Marina, you and I could go through them and ask Carol if she could answer any of the questions.
Yeah, so, and we have answered already several of them, but there's one, for example, about, can we cover stories about AI impact on journalism industry in our region? Does that topic count in this year's fellowship? I'm not sure I totally understand exactly the focus, but if this is an example of, for example, misuse of artificial intelligence in the newsroom or in media, I think that would be really interesting. Like, if it is, if what you mean is the use of AI in journalism and like the things that journalists can do with AI to further or strengthen their reporting, I think that that's not so much the focus of this fellowship. So it's a little bit hard to understand exactly where the question is going, but feel free, you can send us an email with more details and we can weigh in after we see that. But I did want to clarify that some people sometimes tend to, because there's so much conversation about using AI tools in the newsroom, that we get a lot of questions about whether this fellowship also is for that kind of approach. And no, the answer is no. It is about interrogating AI systems in society and their impact on people. So the makers and the people who are impacted by the technologies.
Yes. There were two questions from Marta. One, an international work team with a comparative AI project, how should it apply separately or together? And two, in the team, there's a photographer who is not a journalist, how should it be indicated in the application? Marta, if you go to our website, you can see that two of our previous fellows from the first cohort, Sarah Pabst and Karen, I'm blinking on her last name, sorry, but Karen and Sarah applied as a team. And Sarah was the photographer in this case. So you can just indicate like who is going to do what, who is the photographer in this story, and how you plan to work together on the story. And if it's an international work team, like where are you based in? Why do you need to work together on this project? And how you plan to do that. I think that would be really helpful for us to assess your application.
I can tackle Pablo's question and Nico. So Pablo asked, and again, I hope I am understanding, you say that if we rely on outlets or organizations to cover some expenses, such as audio editing, visual work, for example, for podcast or other multimedia work, that means not including those expenses in our application budget. Yes, of course, anything that your outlet, we love when outlets have, as we say, skin in the game, and that is providing that kind of support and their own teams to make your story better, stronger. So definitely, if they are providing that, then you don't need to put it in the budget, and then you can budget for other costs that you may incur, travel, sometimes FOIA, like Freedom of Information records requests, lodging, a local reporting partner that you might be teaming up maybe in a different city or in a different country, and you can support that person also through the budget. And then Nico is asking, how much do you need to scrutinize one specific algorithm, or is it also possible to investigate stories that are more on the business model or specific companies offering AI technology? I think that we are very flexible in this fellowship, and as Carol explained, some people have been able to even like reverse engineer algorithms, but that is rare and it's difficult to obtain all the data that is needed to do that work. So definitely stories that have to do with business models, that have to do with governance of algorithms in a community, that has to do with the supply chain, the different actors, with labor practices around AI systems. All of those stories are encouraged and are welcome.
And I want to go to Fatima's question and ask this to Carol. So Fatima is asking, what is the minimum knowledge of AI technology required to qualify a journalist to apply for the fellowship? So Carol, what was the minimum level of knowledge you had on AI when you were applying?
Okay, I wouldn't want to say zero, of course, but really I had very minimal knowledge on AI technology when I drafted my proposal, and even, being part of the cohort already. But I think what would be important here is like the willingness to learn, because I think that was my whole experience with the fellowship. Is I really learned a lot, given that collecting your own data and also understanding AI in general and AI accountability. I think that's what is important.
Great, thank you so much.
Boyang, there's a question from someone who hasn't, we don't have a name, but the question is that the person is part of an NGO that partners with media outlets for publication of stories. And so they say they're neither a freelancer nor a staff journalist, somewhere in between. Does this disqualify me, or should I still consider applying? What I would say to this attendee is to, in this case, it would be even more important that you explain in your application who are the journalists and the outlet that you're working with, that you have a firm commitment, and that you let us know who the journalists involved in the reporting and in the publication will be alongside yourself.
Yes, thank you for that, Marina. And we also had a question of, can we look at successful sample pitches from the fellows to give us an idea of how to structure it? I would say that we're careful about sharing the sample pitches, because all of the selected fellows have been selected for different reasons. I think if we share one particular sample, everyone is going to just model off of that and you know, try to structure it, structure it in the way the sample did, which it might not make sense for all of the topics or all of the projects that we have. So I think it might backfire if we share the sample. So I hope that you could understand why we're not sharing a sample. But maybe Carol, you could share a little bit about how you structured your application.
Yeah, I think one tip would be to have a focus for your story project. And I think at first I did have comments about, you know, the project being, you know, ambitious because I'm covering different topics, because again, as I've mentioned earlier, I I didn't really know yet what to focus on. So again, having the focus and also highlighting the novelty of your story project would be good.
There's an important question by Amit, and it's about editorial independence. And the answer is that the Pulitzer Center does not edit your story. Our editors and data specialists, they support you. We cheer you. We might offer advice if you ask for it. But that's why the presence and the commitment of an outlet is so important, because ultimately it's that outlet and those editors who are going to make the tough calls. They are the ones who know the audience. They are the ones who know the legal frameworks in your country and the community where you're going to publish. So the editorial independence is absolutely and 100% respected and encouraged. And the Pulitzer Center does not interfere in editorial decisions that outlets might make. We work collaboratively, and sometimes editors have reached out to us to ask a question, to like maybe think together about an issue, but ultimately it's their call.
Yeah, and we have 2 more questions left, so I think we'll, oh, actually it just increased into 3. Okay, I've reached out to some media outlets to support publishing the story, but haven't gotten a confirmation yet. Will this be an issue?
Answer.
Yes, we've answered that, I think. So yes, we would love to have, one of the things that make your application stronger is whether or not an outlet is committed to publishing your story. To which extent does privacy profiling and data broking qualify as covered topics? Morden, maybe, I'm not sure if I understood your question perfectly, but you could send me an email with the more specific details about what you're thinking about, and I can give you a better answer for that. And then, yeah, Carol is typing an, oh, okay. There was a question. Okay. 2 more questions.
The writer's reply question, it'll be sent by the journalist, not the Pulitzer Center. Thank you. I think that was Sheriff.
Yeah. 2 more questions to go. The question is, you're working as an editor, not a staff writer. You have no recent articles to submit with the application. Considering the situation, is it possible to include older work instead? Sure, please include your work, but if you've edited stories recently as well, just let us know that this is a story that you edited, this is a story you reported on. So that's fine. And I think we've answered all the questions. Okay, so thank you so much, everyone, for staying on for almost an hour. And thank you so much, Carol and Marina, for joining us today and answering all the questions. If you do have any further questions, please reach out to me at BLIM, at pulitzercenter.org. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the fellowship. Hope this session was useful for you, and we'll see you, hopefully we'll see you in the fellowship meeting if your project gets selected. So good luck to you all. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Boyong. Thank you, Marina.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
We stay in touch.
Bye.